and welcome to another video from Language Professora. I greeted you saying hola, so that means that today it's a Spanish lesson. Let's get straight into it. What we're going to be doing is a four-part series on syllabification, rules of stress, and then putting them all together. When it comes down to Spanish, pronunciation is one of the biggest challenges that students face. And they face those challenges because sometimes they're not quite sure how to break their words up into syllables in order to better pronounce them. So this is part one of syllabification. Grab your cuadernos and your bolígrafos and let's get into it. Now, this is just a big word that means breaking your words into syllables so that you can pronounce them better. Now, one of the first things that we want to look at, or what we're going to be looking at in part one, is syllabification as it pertains to our vowels. One of the first things that we want to figure out about our vowels is that we have two categories. We have our strong vowels, and these strong vowels are A, E, O, and then we have our weak vowels. And by default, the weak vowels would be I and U. Now, you need to know this because it plays a big part in how you break up your words when it comes on to the vowel combinations. The next thing that we need to know in terms of breaking our vowels into syllables, there are four rules that we're going to be looking at. Rule one, we're going to have strong plus strong. What does this mean? What this means is when you have two strong vowels coming together, how do they operate? How do they sound? How do you pronounce them? What you're going to be doing with the strong plus a strong is separate them. Think about it along the lines of two strong persons can't be in the same space, sort of. So when you have two strong vowels coming together, you have to separate them. You can't keep them together. An example of this would be in this word. So here we have two vowels coming together. Now those two vowels are both strong. A is a strong vowel. E is also a strong vowel. So the rule says when you have two strong vowels coming together, you separate them. So what you're going to end up with are two syllables, ka, er. And you're going to hear both vowels because they are in two separate syllables right there. So you're going to hear them both separately. Ka, er, ka, er, ka, er, ka, er, ka, er. And you're running together until you get the pronunciation correct. Another example that we could use, this is an interesting one. Creer. Again, we have two vowels coming together and they're both the same, but it doesn't matter. E is a strong vowel, E is a strong vowel. The rule says the two strong men can't be in the same space, separate them. And so we're going to end up with cre, air, creer. So you're not going to say something like creer, it's going to be cre, air. And if you remember what your vowels sound like, you shouldn't go wrong. Let me do one more example of this strong plus strong vowel rule. Another example, very short word, but very relevant just the same. Two strong vowels. We have our E being a strong vowel, and our O also being a strong vowel. In spite of the fact that the word is so short, the rule still applies. Two strong vowels cannot be in the same space, so we separate them. And we end up with fe, o. And you hear both vowels, theo, theo. Both vowels are being pronounced. And that's rule 1. We're going to be looking at rule number 2. At this juncture, I must point out that this is the only category in which you're going to be separating your vowels. Two strong vowels cannot stay together, must be separated. So by default, the other 3 categories, the vowels are going to be staying together, but it's just now a matter of how they're going to sound. So rule 2 is when you have a strong vowel plus a weak vowel. And as I just said, the strong plus the weak, or basically the other 3 coming up, stay together. Think about it like this. A weak person or a weak thing always needs some kind of support. So the weak vowel simply cannot be on its own once you have 2 vowels coming together. What you're going to find is that you will have situations where you don't have 2 vowels. So what we're talking about right here applies only when you have 2 vowels coming together. But if you have an individual vowel, like a 1 vowel standing by itself, that's quite okay. That's a different kettle of fish altogether. We're dealing with when you have 2 vowels coming together. So an example for this one. So remember now, your A, E, O are your strong vowels, I and U, your weak vowels. So we're going to be looking for words where you have the strong vowel appearing before the weak vowel. An example of this is this word right here. Let's take a look at it. So let's identify our vowels coming together. So we have A and U. A is strong, U is weak. Now, what happens when you have these coming together is that the strong vowel is emphasized. I mean, it is the stronger of the 2, so we put an emphasis in terms of the sound of that particular vowel. The strong vowel is emphasized, and the other one is kind of a little bit in the background, right? So this is a good example of this one. And so remember now, we're also discussing syllabification, breaking the word up. So it stands to reason that if you cannot separate the strong vowel from the weak vowel, they have to stay together. Have to. So rather than putting the break here, as we would have done if they were 2 strong vowels, the break goes there. And so you end up with causa, 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 causa. Now I know the temptation in English is to say causa because, well, like in the word because, that AU sound gives us that sound. But in Spanish, it is not so. So in this case, we are saying causa, not caw, but cow. Okay? Let's do another example. All right. So again, we have 2 vowels coming together, A and I. A is our strong vowel. I is our weak vowel. Again, the rule says, once you have a strong plus a weak, the weak needs the support. You cannot separate them. They must stay together. Sorry, lo siento. So they're going to be staying together in the same syllable. And so we put the break there. So this ends up now being kaigo, 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 kaigo. You're hearing that A a little bit stronger than the I. Kaigo, kaigo. You're hearing that A. Let's move on to rule 3. So we've had strong plus weak. Rule 3 is now when you have a weak plus a strong. So rather than appearing after it, the weak vowel is now before the strong one. And what happens, as I said earlier, is that they stay together. That weak vowel needs the support, so they stay together. Let's look at an example of this. All right, so let's lose this one here. And we know that word, right? Well, I would assume that we know that word if we know our Spanish numbers 1 to 10. We know that word. So let's identify our vowels. We have U and we have A. Does it meet this requirement? U is weak, A is strong. So here we have weak plus strong, just as we have it here. And the distinction is that they stay together. And again, the strong is emphasized. You put that stress, that energy, that sound on the stronger of the two. Again, can't separate them. So they have to stay together in that one syllable. And so you put your separation there. So this now becomes quattro. Now, this TR is something that we will discuss in part 2 when we're looking at the consonant rules, because there's something special about this TR, but we're going to look at that in part 2. So that's quattro. Again, it stays in one syllable, quattro. And if you can recall the pronunciation of your letters in the alphabet, we would have discussed in a previous video that the CU gives you that KW sound that your Q would have given you in English. So all of that is coming into play right here. So you see where the alphabet is coming back to haunt you if you didn't make it your friend. So that's rule 3. Can we find one more example for this? I think we can. All right, let's use this one here. All right. So again, we ask ourselves the question, where do we have our vowels occurring together? We have U and we have E. What kind of vowel is U? U is weak. What kind of vowel is E? E is strong. The rule says, can't separate them, they have to stay together. So we know we're going to be keeping them together. So the separation in this word occurs here, between the E and the N, not between the U and the E. So breaking this into syllables now becomes swe, nyo. Remember that the tilde gives us that invisible I sound coming after the N. Swe, nyo, swe, nyo, sueño, sueño. And that's rule 3 in a nutshell. Final rule, and then we're going to wrap up this video. Rule 4. So by deduction, if we're following, you have strong plus strong, strong plus weak, weak plus strong. So what do you have remaining? When the two weak vowels decide that they have to lean on each other. And by default, if you have If you have the two weak vowels standing side by side, they have to stay together because they cannot operate on their own. On their own, they would surely fall apart. So we do have cases where you're going to have two weak vowels being together. Let's pull an example. Oh, I love this one. I always like to use this one with my students because it's pretty much the same look to the word. It's just the spelling that's a little bit different, but this is always a fun one to use. So that's one of them, and this is the other. All right, so let's look at the first one. Where do we have our vowels occurring? I and you. I, weak, you, also weak. Now what's going to happen is, yes, they're both weak, but somebody has to make a sound, right? You have to hear someone. And so what you're going to find happening is this. The stress or the emphasis is going to be on the second vowel. So whichever one comes second is the one that you're going to be leaning your stress onto. So in this case, we have the I and we have the U having to stay together. We're going to hear the U being more pronounced than the I. The stress is going to be on the U more than the I. Remember that, all right? Now when we come to break this word up into syllables, because remember that's our broad topic, syllabification, the break is going to occur right there. So this becomes let's push that over there a little bit. This becomes that. I deliberately didn't say it yet, okay? How are we going to pronounce this now? There are several things happening here. One of the first things that I want to remind us of is the rule regarding the C that says when an I follows the C sounds like an S. Go back to the letters of the alphabet and be reminded of that, please. So this is not going to be K, but S. Ciudad, 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 ciudad. If you think about saying ciudad, ciudad, that's what it sounds like, ciudad. All right, so that's one. The other combination for this category would be flipping them because it's only two weak vowels that we have really. So let's flip them. So now we have the U in front of the I. Lo siento. The U is weak. The I is also weak. We know we cannot separate them. So our separation would be coming here. And one of the things that we want to do as well is when you're pronouncing a word, work with your natural inclination outside of these rules that we're looking at. There is a natural inclination for how you pronounce a word. So we're going to work with that when we don't have the rules to contend with. Because for the rest of the word, we don't have any double syllables, sorry, any double vowels or double consonants occurring. It's just consonant, vowel, consonant, vowel. So we break them accordingly. But how do we now pronounce this? So we have C-U-I-D-A-D-O. Now again, we go back to the alphabet and the letter C. And what happens with the letter C when it is followed by U? Up here, the letter C sounded like an S, but down here, being followed by a U, it's going to sound like a K. Do you remember that thing that we spoke about with the letter C? If you don't remember, go and check the alphabet video. All right, so it's going to be sounding like a K. And the other thing that we looked at in the alphabet video as well is the fact that when you have CU, it takes that KW sound from your Q. Okay, so right away, we have some clues as to how we're going to be pronouncing this word. Q or Q, and the stress again is going to be on the second vowel. So this is now going to become qui, da, do. Qui, qui. You're hearing that E. Qui, da, do. Cuidado, 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 cuidado. You're hearing that QU, like that KW, and that ko sound coming out, along with the I being emphasized. You're hearing it. So what are we saying in a nutshell when it comes down to vowels and syllabification? We have 4 rules. Strong plus strong, strong plus weak, weak plus strong, weak plus weak. In all except the strong plus strong, the vowels stay together. Once there is a strong vowel, you're going to hear those strong vowels, whether they're separate or whether they're staying with a weak vowel, you're going to hear the strong vowel over the weak vowel. When you have the 2 weak vowels coming together, it's the second vowel that will be emphasized. So in a nutshell, that's part 1 of syllabification. See you for part 2. Adios.